So I just read L'étranger par Albert Camus. This is the second Camus I've read. I read the First Man. I read that one in English translation. I've also tried to read The Myth of Sisyphus, but I can't really get into philosophical nonfiction. It's just too much of a slog for me. I much prefer the fiction. So L'étranger, I think it's translated as the stranger or the outsider in Britain. It could also be the foreigner. Sort of the idea that this is a person who is sort of estranged from society, from humanity. It's about this guy Meursault, who kills a man and then goes on trial because of it. So the first half of the book is his life sort of leading up to this murder, and then the second half of the book is his incarceration and trial leading up to his execution. So Meursault he's a very indifferent man, a very apathetic man. Very passive as well. He just sort of goes along with everything, and he sees no reason not to do things or no reason to do things. It doesn't seem to matter to him one way or the other. He seems to be quite unfeeling. He doesn't have any sort of empathy or any sort of understanding of the feelings of others and of what others go through. The book starts with the death of his mother, and he doesn't really feel much. He goes out to the asylum or the old age home where she had lived and presides over her funeral, her burial, does sort of everything he's supposed to do, but he doesn't really go into mourning. And everyone sort of notices this, that he still smokes next to the coffin and drinks coffee with milk in it, not black, which is supposed to sort of restrain yourself, I guess, and drink black coffee during funerals or when you're mourning. And then the day after his mother's funeral, he goes back to Algiers. So it takes place in Algeria, North Africa, which was where sort of Camus had come from. It was published in the 40s, so you can imagine it sort of takes place in the 40s. There's no mention of a war, so maybe it's sort of in the 30s before the war. But it goes back to Algiers and runs into this girl Marie who he had known, and they go swimming, they go to a movie, and then they go back to his place, and they sort of start this relationship, which as you're reading it, it's like, okay, sure, whatever, but this will sort of come back to bite him in a way. We also meet the other people that live in his apartment building. It's one older man, Salamano, who has this miserable, dying dog that he's constantly beating and abusing and yelling at, and seems to hate this dog. We find out later that he had gotten the dog to replace his wife, who had passed away, which I don't know if that's the way he treats the dog is similar to how he treated his wife or what. But at one point he loses the dog, and he goes to Meursault for sort of comfort, like, how do I get my dog back? What do I do? And Meursault just tries to, like, not comfort him, but just straight up explains, like, go to the pound. Look, dogs sometimes run for kilometers to get back home. It could show up. Look, it's going to be okay. And Salamano says, like, I guess it's not true everything that they say about you, but how horrible you are. And Meursault's kind of struck by that, like, what do you mean everyone thinks I'm like a horrible person? He also has this other roommate, Raymond, who claims to be a magasinier, a sort of a warehouse labor worker, but it's implied, and I think it's pretty clear that he's actually a pimp. And he invites Meursault in and keeps saying, like, hey, you're my friend, right? We're good friends. We should be good friends. And talks to him about this girl that claims is sort of his girlfriend or his mistress that is cheating on him or something. But I think it's really that, like, he's a pimp and she's one of his prostitutes who's taking money on the side or from another man or something like that. And he sort of enlists Meursault to help him deal with this woman, and Meursault doesn't think that, hey, well, this is wrong, you shouldn't treat the woman this way. He just goes along with it because to him nothing really matters one way or the other. So he ends up writing a letter to this woman to try and get her to come over and sleep with Raymond, who's plans to sort of like treat her like trash after having sex with her, kick her out, get revenge on her. And yeah, Meursault just goes along with it and writes the letter. He continues to have this relationship with Marie. She's over at his place one night when they hear Raymond beating up this woman that Meursault had written the letter to bring her over. The police get involved, and Raymond manages to get them off his back by saying, hey, she cheated on me, she was being unfaithful, whatever. And then he enlists the next day Meursault to come with him to the police station as a witness to say, yeah, she did cheat on Raymond, even though she didn't really, that we know of. And the police let him off with a warning. They then decide to go to this friend of Raymond, this guy Masson, who has this cabin out by the beach. So they all go, Meursault, Marie, Raymond, they all head out to the beach, and on the way they sort of meet these Arabs, one of them being the brother of this woman that Raymond had beat up. And so the brother's like kind of out for revenge, right? Understandably. But they manage to sort of give them the slip and get out to the beach with Messon. But then on the beach, Raymond and Merceau go for a walk together and they bump into these two Arabs again, one of them being the brother who wants to sort of revenge Raymond. And I guess Masson's with him as well at this point. And they get into a fight. One of the Arabs pulls out a knife and cuts Raymond up pretty badly. They all get back to the cabin and get a doctor, and Raymond gets stitched up. And then he gets a gun, a revolver, and heads back out trying to find this guy and get revenge. And this time just Raymond, and he doesn't want anyone to go with him, but Merceau goes with him as well to keep him company, and manages to get the gun from him and says, hey, look, I'll keep the gun and we won't shoot him, but if he brings the knife out again, then we'll defend ourselves and then I'll shoot him. But Merceau does this to try and prevent Raymond from killing this man, because Raymond's quite upset, right? They come across the men, but they run away or flee or whatever. So Raymond goes back to the cabin. Merceau, for whatever reason, wants to go back out and keeps walking up and down the beach. It's really hot. He's getting close to heat stroke, sweating profusely. He's starting to see things, but he then bumps it into again this brother of the woman who Raymond had assaulted. And like I said, he's really sort of tripping out with the sun and the heat and everything. But this brother pulls out a knife again, and sort of the flash of the knife and the blade causes Merceau to pull out the revolver and shoot this man, kills him. But then once the man is dead, he then shoots him 4 more times, shoots the corpse 4 more times. So why does he do this? I don't know. The first bullet could have been explained by the whole situation and the context and everything, but the 4 other bullets, I don't know. And that ends the first part of the book. The second part of the book is, like I said, his imprisonment and trial. So Marie comes to visit him at first. She had, I forgot to mention this, but she had proposed to him and asked to marry him, and he's so indifferent and apathetic. He's like, sure, we'll get married if you want to. She said, but do you love me? Which she had asked earlier, and he said well, what does it matter if I love you or not? And she's like, do you? And he's like, well, again, it doesn't really matter, but I probably don't actually love you, which is a crazy thing to say with a girl that you're sleeping with. And then when she proposes to him and he's like, yeah, sure, we can get married. She's like, oh, so you love me? He's like, no, I don't really think so. It just doesn't really matter to me. If you want to get married, we can get married. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other. His boss also had sort of offered him a job in Paris. They needed someone. And you'd think someone in Algiers would sort of jump at the opportunity to move to Paris and the big city. But Merceau was just kind of like, sure, if you need me to, or I can just stay here. I don't really care one way or the other, which people kind of think is weird, right? That this person, this Merceau, doesn't have the ambitions, the feelings that other humans have, that the other people are expected to have. Anyway, so Marie comes and visits him and still plans on marrying him once he gets out of prison. He ends up in prison for 11 months until they finally start his trial. And he sort of adapts to prison life pretty well. He sort of says something like, he's able to remember sort of everything. He says something to the effect of, if a man has experienced only one day in their life and spends 100 years in prison, they could spend those 100 years sort of recollecting and remembering different things from that one day. The mind has a sort of an infinite capacity for thinking about things and understanding things and visualizing things and re-experiencing different things, which was interesting. We get to the trial, and sort of all the characters in this book, the people from his mother's funeral, even Salamano, Raymond, Masson, Marie, Celeste, all these different people from his life are at the trial and sort of speak on his behalf or speak to his character. Because the trial sort of is trying to figure out what is Merceau, what was his sort of motivation for doing the murder? Is he going to do another murder? What kind of a person is he? Because it's not sort of trying to figure out if he did it or not. He's just, well, yeah, I did it. I shot the guy 5 times. And so the trial sort of devolves into an argument about, well, this man didn't cry at his mother's funeral. He didn't grieve her. He must be some sort of a psychopath. The day after his mother's funeral, he goes out, starts sleeping with this girl, and he goes to watch this comedy film and goes swimming. There's something clearly wrong with this man. And then he goes and murders this guy and shoots him 5 times. His best friend's this pimp. He's clearly up to no good. There's a funny line, or at least I found it funny, after sort of his friend Celeste stands up for him and says he's such a great guy. It's just sort of a chance encounter. It was bad luck. His murder, it wasn't premeditated. Merceau is a great guy. Merceau says, after Celeste sort of comes off the stand and sort of looks at him with almost tears in his eyes as he walks past him, he says, moi je n'ai rien dit, je n'ai fait aucun geste, mais c'est la première fois de ma vie que j'ai eu envie d'embrasser un homme. Just It was the first time in my life I ever wanted to kiss a man, which shows that he does feel something. I just thought that was funny. But anyways, after everyone goes through the whole thing and he's sort of not really non-repentant, but he's just like, yeah, I did it. I shot the guy, whatever. But at the end of the trial, it kind of goes both ways. His lawyer keeps telling him it's going to be fine, you're going to get off, but the prosecutor keeps pushing this line of this guy is like crazy. Look how he treated his mother. He doesn't even know his mother's own age. And at the end of it, he is sentenced to be beheaded, which is kind of severe, but that's the way she goes. And so he spends the rest of his time sitting in his cell waiting for a sort of appeal, but probably appeal's not going to go through. There's a priest chaplain that offers to see him, and he doesn't want to see the chaplain. He's atheist. But eventually the chaplain does come in and tries to talk to him and save his soul and whatnot, and questions like, don't you fear death and everything. And it's at this point at the very end of the book where Merceau, he finally snaps, and he sort of grabs the priest and shakes him and says stuff like, what does it matter if I die now or if I die in 30 years? I'm going to die in either case. Everyone dies. Sort of life has no meaning. The universe is a great big joke. I lived my life, I just went along with it and did what I did, and now it's over, and there's nothing you can do to change that. It doesn't really matter. Even if you could, nothing really matters. The end. He says at the end of that, comme si cette grande couleur m'avait purgé du mal, vidé d'espoir, devant cette nuit chargée des signes et d'étoiles, je m'ouvrais pour la première fois à la tendre indifférence du monde. So at that moment, after this intense anger and getting all of these emotions out and losing all hope, he sort of opened himself up to the tenderness of the indifference of the world or of the universe. It's quite a beautiful line. And then it ends with him saying that, I hope there's lots of people at my execution, and I hope that it's filled with the cries of their hate. So is this a book about a man that's sort of given up on life? I think it's a man that sort of never held to life to begin with. Does not care one way or the other, realizes that we can only do so much, and there's no point in fighting against sort of fate or destiny, or not even ideas of fate or destiny, but things happen, and we only have so much control, and everyone dies, and then we're dead, and the universe doesn't care. There's nothing we can do about it. That's just life. So yeah, very interesting story. Very short too, like less than 200 pages. That was L'étranger par Albert Camus.